Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you. The Tariq Skubal sweepstakes just became the biggest story of the offseason, and Toronto is right in the thick of it. Not on the outside looking in, not as a long shot, but as a legitimate contender for the best starting pitcher in baseball. And if you're a Blue Jays fan, you should be equal parts excited and terrified right now. Detroit is staring down a contract negotiation with Skubal that's hit a wall. We're talking about a gap so massive that the Tigers are actually entertaining trade offers for a guy who just dominated the entire league. This is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come around often. An ace in his absolute prime, available not because he's damaged goods or on the decline, but purely because of dollars and cents. And three teams have emerged as the heaviest hitters in this race: the Cubs, the Mets, and your Toronto Blue Jays. Let's start with Chicago because their situation tells you everything about why this market is heating up so fast. The Cubs had a rotation they could trust just last year, solid depth, reliable arms, the kind of staff that lets you sleep at night. Then everything fell apart. Matthew Boyd was brilliant when healthy. Cade Horton showed flashes, but they lost Shota Imanaga and Michael Soroka to free agency. Justin Steele is rehabbing from elbow surgery. Suddenly, that comfortable feeling vanished, and Chicago realized they're one elite arm away from being dangerous again in the Central. That's where Skubal enters the picture. The Cubs have exactly what Detroit needs: a farm system loaded with young, controllable talent that's either already proven or very close. Names like Ethan Conrad, Moises Ballesteros, and Jackson Wiggins are getting tossed around. That's the kind of package that hurts to give up, but it's also the kind that lands you a pitcher with a 2.21 ERA and an under 1 whip. Chicago knows what they're missing, they felt it all season long, and they have the assets to make Detroit listen. But here's the thing that should make Toronto fans nervous. The Cubs aren't desperate, they're competitive enough to believe they can contend right now, but they're also young enough to walk away if the price gets too high. That makes them dangerous because they won't panic bid. They'll stay disciplined, make a strong offer, and if it doesn't work, they'll pivot. That's a team operating from a position of strength, not desperation. Now let's talk about New York, because the Mets are a completely different animal in this race. They collapsed last year in spectacular fashion, started hot, flamed out, missed the playoffs despite holding a spot for months. It was ugly. And the front office knows they need more than just tweaks. They need a statement. They need an ace who changes the entire narrative around that rotation. Enter Tariq Skubal. The Mets have something most teams don't: money. Lots of it. They can not only trade the prospects Detroit wants, names like Mark Vientos, Luis Angel, Jonah Tong, but they can also turn around and offer Skubal the kind of extension that would make him the highest paid pitcher in baseball history. That's a package nobody else can match. Trade assets plus financial commitment that goes beyond what most teams are willing or able to do. And that's where Toronto has to ask itself a hard question. Can the Blue Jays compete with that? Because this isn't just about matching prospect value, this is about convincing Detroit that Toronto's offer is better, and then convincing Skubal that he wants to be here long term. The Mets have urgency, resources, and a massive media market. They're not messing around, they want to erase the embarrassment of last season, and they'll spend whatever it takes to do it. For Blue Jays fans, this feels familiar, doesn't it? That sinking feeling when a big market team enters the picture and suddenly the player you wanted feels just out of reach. It's frustrating, it's exhausting, and it's exactly why this race matters so much. Which brings us to Toronto. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the Blue Jays aren't just a name being floated, they're being listed as one of the 3 best destinations for Skubal. That's not speculation, that's legitimate interest, backed by need, assets, and opportunity. The rotation last season was inconsistent. A 4.34 ERA ranked 20th in the league. Kevin Gausman was brilliant. Yusei Kikuchi had moments, but there were holes. Too many nights where the bullpen had to carry too much weight too early. Too many games that slipped away because the starting pitching couldn't hold. Skubal fixes that completely. He becomes the #1 starter this team has been missing, the guy who takes the ball in Game 1 of a playoff series and gives you 7 innings of dominance, the anchor who stabilizes everyone behind him. With Gausman and Skubal at the top, suddenly this rotation goes from questionable to elite. That's not an exaggeration. That's just what happens when you add the best lefty in baseball to an already competitive staff. Toronto has the pieces to make a serious offer. Ricky Tiedemann, Gage Stanifer, Arjun Nimala. Those are high-level prospects, the kind Detroit would absolutely consider. But here's the catch. The Tigers would almost certainly ask for Tristan Yukic.
And that's where this gets emotionally complicated. Jukic just became a postseason hero. He was lights out when it mattered most. Fans watched him grow up right in front of them. Giving him up would hurt. A lot. So you have to ask yourself, would you trade Jukic for Skubal? Would you give up a young arm who just proved he can handle October pressure for an established ace who's 1 year away from free agency? It's not an easy answer. It's the kind of decision that defines a front office. Because if you do it and Skubal walks after 1 year, you just traded your future for nothing. But if you don't do it and another team lands him, you're left wondering what could have been. The Blue Jays are at a crossroads. They were 2 outs away from winning the World Series. 2 outs. That's how close this team is. And when you're that close, you don't sit back and wait. You push. You take risks. You go all in. Bringing in Skubal would be exactly that. An aggressive move that says we're not rebuilding, we're not retooling, we're finishing what we started. But it also means accepting risk. Real, tangible risk. You're betting on 1 year making the difference. You're betting that Skubal stays healthy, that the chemistry works, that the team takes that final step. And if it doesn't work out, you've given up pieces that could have been part of this roster for the next decade. This is what makes the offseason so brutal for fans. You want your team to be bold. You want them to go after the big names. But you also know every move comes with consequences. Every addition means a subtraction somewhere else. And when it's a player like Skubal, the stakes are massive. The Blue Jays aren't underdogs in this race. They're not the team hoping for a miracle. They're a legitimate contender with real assets and real need. But so are the Cubs, and so are the Mets. This is going to come down to who's willing to pay the most and who can sell the best vision to both Detroit and Skubal himself. Toronto has a strong case, a roster ready to win now, a fan base that's hungry, a city that would embrace him immediately. But they're going to have to prove it. And that's where we are. 3 teams, 1 ace, a decision that could define multiple franchises for years. The Blue Jays have a chance to land a generational pitcher and complete the roster that came so close last year. But it's going to take courage, it's going to take sacrifice, and it's going to take a front office willing to bet everything on right now. Because that's what this moment demands. Not caution, not patience, but boldness. The kind of move that makes you hold your breath when it's announced because you know it changes everything. Tarik Skubal is available. Toronto is in the mix. And Blue Jays fans are about to find out just how serious their team is about winning a championship. This is the offseason that matters. This is the decision that defines the window. And whatever happens next, it's going to be impossible to look away.